friends. Welcome to episode 259 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian in my 17th year, I knew I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, my interview guests, and listeners who reach out to the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. One of my goals in 2024 is to create a variety of opportunities to showcase as many voices and experiences of school librarians as possible on this podcast. This January, I asked listeners to send in their voicemails of Hills I'll Die On. Today's episode is a compilation of 7 voice messages sent in by listeners and my conversation with Kelsey Bogan. February's prompt is Purchases I Regret. And I'm really excited for this March because our prompt is, what makes us amazing? I hope you'll consider sending in your voice messages to my email, schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. Be sure to see the link in today's show notes for all the details. Amanda Jones's book, That Librarian, will be available starting on August 27th, but you can pre-order your copy now. And if you use the indie bookseller Cavalier House Books in Amanda's hometown of Denham Springs, Louisiana, you'll get a signed copy. I've included a link in the show notes. When you look at the cover of Amanda's book, you might also recognize the Freedom Fighter shirt that she's wearing. She reached out to the designer, Christy, who then designed a line of That Librarian apparel, as well as a That Librarian flair, such as a bag, a sticker, and a mug. I love that we can all be that librarian who advocates for our library students' access to books. You will find a link in today's show notes as well. 15% of the proceeds go to support the Texas Library Association, as this is the home state of the designer. Friends, I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback and episode suggestions. You can reach me either on Facebook, on X, formerly known as Twitter. My handle is at @LMS_United. On Threads, you can find me at School Librarians United, and on Blue Sky at SLU Podcast, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I'll be sure to send you a podcast sticker. Be sure to listen to episode 224. I announce a sponsorship with Literati Book Fairs. And now is a chance to hear from one of Literati's team members, Lisa. Friends, I'm so excited. Lisa Howard, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Amy. I'm glad to be here.
You know, friends, I am so grateful to Literati to have this opportunity to meet with many of their team members, because it really does give me a better appreciation of the kind of collaborative effort that goes into ensuring that school librarians have a really fantastic experience working with Literati. Lisa, would you please let listeners know, what is it that you do for Literati?
Absolutely. Thanks, Amy. My role at Literati is I'm the Vice President of Operations. In that role, I plan, direct, coordinate, oversee the operational activities in the Literati fulfillment centers for both book fairs and clubs. What that means is I'm also ensuring the development and implementation of effective operations and cost-effective systems to meet the current and future needs of the organization. In addition, I manage all aspects of the transportation, shipping, and asset procurement to support getting Literati products into the hands of our customers.
I can't imagine. You must be busy all day long.
Yes, I am. And then some.
But again, I appreciate when a book fair arrives at my school, what I sort of fail to understand is all the work that it took to get that content to me in a way that is timely. And all of a sudden we're sort of eyes wide open to realizing just how much work there is behind the scenes. So would you let us know, what do you do to support school librarians? How do you make sure that we have the best book fair experience possible?
Absolutely. And thank you for asking. As book fairs is something that I hold near and dear to my heart, Amy. I have spent most of my career supporting reading and art education in the schools. Reading is my first love, and I believe that every child should have the opportunity to select a book that speaks to them, and that every child should experience the joys of book ownership. While our great data and algorithm ability to watch and learn what the kids are buying, our product team works tirelessly to ensure the best products are available for our operations teams to pick, pack, and ship every fair. As fairs go through the production process, we have great fulfillment center operation team members that work hard every day to ensure that the right books are placed on the right fixture for every fair. I read every customer survey that comes in, and we make necessary adjustments from the feedback to ensure the book fair experience is the best possible for every customer. I also visit fairs each season to spend quality time with our customers, seeing what we're doing right and what we can improve upon.
Wow. Wait, you guys survey all of the librarians who have Literati Book Fairs, right?
We do. And we have a lot of great people that give us great feedback of how we can improve and make things better, and also attaboys for what we do well. We really appreciate our customers' time in doing that.
Well, and I got to say, as somebody who has hosted many book fairs, 14 to be exact, friends, because I do keep track, and forgive me, but school librarians are very detail-oriented. And you know, when we invest this kind of time and take away from other things we could be doing, it means so much to know that the folks at Literati are doing everything they can to ensure that we are having a great experience. Lisa Howard, thank you so much. I hope that you come back on the show. I'd love to learn more about what you do.
Thank you so much, Amy, for having me. Have a great day.
Friends, be sure to tune in to learn all about Literati and their very generous offer. Librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. And now a word from our sponsor, Capstone. Capstone is an innovative publisher and education technology provider of children's content for school libraries, classrooms, and at-home learning. Home of the award-winning PebbleGo research database, Capstone has a passion for creating inspired learning and intellectual curiosity in children, and I'm so excited to be working with them. I'm also grateful to Capstone for their continued commitment to support the podcast in Season 6. They are offering listeners of School Librarians United a very special discount. Visit shop.capstonepop.com and use the code UNITED to get $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and Capstone interactive ebooks. That's code UNITED for $20 off an order of $100 or more for both print and ebooks on shop.capstonepub.com. And now for today's episode, Hills I'll Die On, with 7 listeners sharing their hills and my conversation with Kelsey Bogan.
Hey everyone, my name is Amanda Hunt. I am a middle school 6 through 8 librarian in South Central Texas. And the hill that I will die on is when people say that audiobooks do not count as reading. They 100% do. I realize that, it's different senses being involved. Your eyes aren't the same as using your ears. And an audiobook can be a different experience than a physical book, but the results are the same. At the end of the book, I can have a literary memory, if you will. I can be able to talk about the characters, the plot, the way that the book wrapped up, the themes, all of the things that encompass the book. I can have a deep discussion. It also takes away the accessibility part. So to say that it doesn't count as reading, those people that rely on audiobooks for their sole purpose of reading, such as if they are sightless or visually impaired, or if they have ADHD and can't sit with a physical book in their hand or a tablet, or if they're dyslexic, those people's reading is just as valid. So when people say that audiobooks don't count as reading, it really gets my back up. And I just wanted to say that is the hill that I will die on. You can follow me for more very strong opinions at the Next Gen Librarian.
Hi, I'm Arika Dickens, an elementary school librarian in the Seattle area. The hill I'll die on is about books and their gender. In other words, there is no such thing as a girl book. and there is no such thing as a boy book. There are books and there are readers. The gender of the reader who is looking at the book does not matter. The gender of a character on the cover of the book or the color of the book itself does not matter when you're looking to put books into the hands of readers. Now, I know I am preaching to the choir right now, but not often do I get to preach this to the parents, to the caregivers, to the teachers that I work with. But to the children, I do. I make it a real meaningful part of our library lessons in the elementary school to talk about how there are books for readers. It might not be the book for you, but it doesn't mean it's not the book for somebody else. And we're not going to yuck somebody else's yum. And I use my own child as an example, because when my son was 7 years old, he was obsessed with The Princess in Black. He absolutely loved it, and he described it as being full of, and I remember his exact quote, monsters and fighting and stuff. Because if you've read Shannon Hale's book, you know it is. It's so awesome. It is full of action and adventure, and it is the perfect book to give to a 7-year-old, which is why I will read it out loud in first and second grade classes and get kids fired up about that series. And I'll tell them, just because it's pink on the cover doesn't mean that it's a girl book. Just because I'm wearing blue that particular day doesn't mean that I can only go read blue books. I'm a girl. I can read whatever book I want. I can even read a book in the library if it says only for boys. And boys, you can go read one that says it's only for girls. I don't know why people put those on the cover of books, but they do, and that doesn't mean you can't read them. The hardest part of this whole hill that I'll die on is trying to get it across to the grown-ups, to the adults of the world, because they are sometimes very well-meaning, and yet it is hard to try to persuade them that it is okay to allow a child to read whatever they choose. Shannon Hale, speaking of her Princess in Black series, got on this soapbox a couple of years ago in a Publisher's Weekly article about have we solved the problem of boy books and girl books? And based on what I see and hear in today's society, from here in Seattle to places I've taught across the world, I don't think we have. So it's for us to know in the library that what we're sharing in front of kids and actively talking about it. That's part of this hill I'll die on, is to keep talking about it with kids, because they have to know that books, all books, are for readers. Thanks for listening.
Hey, this is Robin Thompson, and I'm the librarian at McAllister Elementary in Richmond Hill, Georgia, which is right outside of Savannah. And the hill that I will die on is genreification. I cannot imagine having, especially an elementary library, not genreified. When I started here, I would have so many kids where, little girl voices, where are all your princess books? Where are all your mermaid books? And the boys wanted to know, well, everybody wanted to know about Pokemon. And if you know anything about Pokemon, they make graphic novels, they make gaming books, they make chapter books. So which ones are you talking about? So once we decided to genreify, it has been a game changer. From kindergartners now feeling very independent about finding what they want and not just walking around like they were lost in the library and just grabbing something without really thinking about it, to our older kids who now have explored all the different genres that we have and have tried new ones, not just ones that they would always, want to go to. So we have loved having it genreified. I feel that it makes our kids very independent as far as checking things out, even though we are still needed sometimes for assistance. I love that they are able to walk in and just know where they want to go. But also just when they're looking, even if they don't know exactly what they want and they're looking around, at least there's signage and there's areas that they can look and just not see the spine of some books. They can see exactly what's going to be in that area. So that is one of our favorite things. It's the hill I will die on. Anybody who doesn't genreify, I will go to battle for, against you. So I just think it's wonderful, and it's made our library so much better. And if you want to follow me, I am Crazy Mrs. T, CrazyMRST, on Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter, and Blue Sky.
Hi, my name is Melissa Shenk, and I'm a lower school librarian in Atlanta at the Davis Academy. The hill that I would die on is to stop referring to the library as a media center and to my position as a media specialist. It sounds like a term stuck in the 1990s as if I'm still using a projector and vis-a-vis markers. We should be updating the definition for library and librarian, not changing the words because it's always evolving. You can find me on Twitter as GawTech Librarian. Go Jackets!
Hi, Amy and listeners. This is Sara Smith, a district librarian from Central California. And I was recently at Disneyland, which is the happiest place on earth and a wonderful place to find another hill that you'll die on. But while you're waiting in lines, which are not the happiest place on earth, I found one of my favorite Twitter friends had drawn a lovely little ditty about how reading is reading. And it had these cute little people reading different types of books. And one of them was an audiobook. And that sparked all kinds of debate amongst just generic people, librarians, scholars, English teachers, just all kinds of folks who had all kinds of opinions. And turns out that just tons of folks don't think that audiobooks is reading. And there was just a slew of all kinds of other people pointing out all kinds of other things that wasn't reading. And there were a bunch of people in this thread that wanted to replace the word reading a book. We're not reading a book. We want to replace that word. Maybe we should say we're consuming a book or experiencing a book, because you can't read an audiobook or a graphic novel or something with a bunch of pictures, or, because the pictures do all the work for you. So we should say that we're experiencing a book. I don't know about y'all, but I really don't want to go up to my friends and start a conversation with, what book are you experiencing this week, everyone? That just doesn't feel the same. What book are you consuming, y'all? That just doesn't feel the same. Plus, the point of their reasoning was that they wanted a word that was more inclusive of the types of experiences everyone was having. When I feel like the word reading is inclusive, okay? We're reading books. It doesn't need to matter. We don't need to get all crazy and be like experiencing for audiobooks and experiencing for graphic novels and experiencing for blah, 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 blah. It's reading, okay? We're reading books. Why do we need to have different words to encapsulate all this different type of reading? It's just reading. We're reading books. So reading is reading, no matter how you're doing it. No matter the type of reading that you're doing, whether you're reading with your ears, reading with your eyes, reading with your fingers, reading with your whatever. It's reading is reading. And let's stop trying to other people and other their experiences and other the way that they're doing things. And in that whole Twitter thread was this wonderful tweet. You don't read with your eyes, you read with your mind. And I thought that was wonderful. And if we could all just encapsulate that woman, that would be great. So this was what hill I was dying on in line at Disneyland. And I discovered recently how passionate I was about that. I knew that I was passionate with graphic novels and fighting that good fight. But I was so incensed about this artist putting this beautiful thing into the world. And then these people just piling on him about, audiobooks isn't reading and this isn't reading and da-da-da-da. And it was awful. And, folks, just let people read what they want to read. Let them read how they want to read and leave them alone. Just let them be passionate about it. And let's encourage the love of reading any way, shape, or form. And that's my hill. And there I am dying on it. And thank you very much.
My name is Melanie Le Jeune, and I'm a high school librarian in Louisiana.
The hill that I will die on is that schools and educators need to allow time for students to read a book of choice daily. We say reading is important, but many times, especially in the high school setting, we do not show it with our actions. All it takes is 10 minutes a day, and that makes a huge difference. And I'm so appreciative of the teachers at my school who try to make this happen. Last year, a science teacher at my school even created a bookmark about the science of reading, and she included things like it improves memory and reduces stress and encourages creativity. And of course, she included her sources as well. If you are looking for resources that led me to this hill, read Book Love by Penny Kittle, Read Aside by Kelly Gallagher, or The Joy of Reading by Donalyn Miller and Terry Lassane. Happy reading!
Hi gang, I'm Steve. I'm a school librarian in New Jersey, and the hill I'm going to die on is we all need to move to Blue Sky as our social media app. Okay, now hear me out. I get it. Blue Sky, it's still in development. Right now, it's not even open to the public. It's invite only. So here's the thing about that though. Because it's invite only, there's really a particular vibe that it's got going on right now. And it's so much better than the previous most popular site, which was Twitter or X or whatever the heck you want to call it. We had such an amazing community on Twitter, and I loved it, but that place is just falling to pieces. And here's the thing, Blue Sky, that can't happen there. Blue Sky is not owned by any one person or any one group. It's decentralized, so that means it can't be sold to some other person. It's not under one particular corporate umbrella. So it's not owned by, let's say, Meta or Insta, or they're owned by the same people, aren't they? Doesn't matter. Here's the thing. Blue Sky, it's its own thing, and it's built by the people who started Twitter, so it's got the same kind of feel as Twitter. Now, it's still in development. It doesn't do everything that Twitter does. I readily admit that, but they are adding features all the time. It's getting closer and closer to being what Twitter was before it went off the rails. So why would you not want to be in the same place, but with better people? And here's the cool thing about the fact that it's invite only. If you get an invite, after a little while, then you are given an invite to give to somebody else. So if a bunch of us get on, and a bunch of us have gotten onto Blue Sky lately, if a bunch of us get onto Blue Sky, we get those invites, we can start inviting other school librarians. And pretty soon we can have all the school librarians on Blue Sky, where we can all live in peace and harmony and have a wonderful, engaging community. Why would you not want to do this? It is awesome. It is amazing. I am enjoying my conversations there so much more than I enjoy the conversations on Twitter these days. It's unfortunately sad, but true. There's a much better community growing over at Blue Sky. I've got some invites. I am happy to give them to folks. You can DM me at Twitter, and I will happily get you one. Yes, I'm still on Twitter so that I can help people get off of Twitter. So DM me, I will give you an invite, and then when you get your invite, you can share it with somebody else that's awesome and bring them over with us, and we can have an awesome community over there instead of having to watch Twitter wither and fade and die before our eyes. So think about it.
Kelsey Bogan, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
Today's episode marks your fourth time on the show. You've recorded an episode every year for the past 4 years running. Listeners will remember your previous episodes. Episode 134, Ditching Dewey, in July of 2021. Episode 198, Genreification, in October of 2022. And episode 219, End of Year Reports, in April of 2023. Would you, for anybody who has not heard one of your episodes, would you introduce yourself, tell us about your library, the grades you serve, where in the country you are, and a little bit about the programs you offer?
Sure. So I'm mostly a high school librarian in the suburbs of Philadelphia, so outside of Philadelphia and Pennsylvania. So this is my 8th year, I think, in the high school. I did a very short 6-month stint at an elementary school. That was long enough for me. I like the teenagers. And I also teach for San Jose. I adjunct for a course for San Jose for school librarians. And I do speaking and presenting as well, and blogging. But in my high school program, mostly been fortunate to be supported in modernizing the library. So over 8 years, there's been a lot of all the fun stuff the weeding and the genrifying and the ditching Dewey, and I just love collection work, so that's really what I like to do. But been really working hard to get circulation increase, which I someday will finish my blog post about, because I'm very proud of our circulation increases. And I am working through that blog post. But that's been the main priority, is getting more reading happening in our schools.
Well, and I know that we are going to make sure to share where you are in social media. For me, a lot of the fun things that you do are in the form of TikTok, and you do some really fun things. And those are some really great instructional videos for a lot of people who are really just trying to learn how to do things in our spaces. And so I'll make sure at the end of our conversation, we're going to go over all your social media, because you put out some really fantastic content, and it is the kind of content that would really support librarians regardless of where they are in their professions. You know, over the years, I have come to respect you as a candid and irreverent person who has strong opinions on all things library related. You are the perfect person to join us for this conversation, Hills I'll Die On. So on January 12th, you posted, and I'll include in the show notes, your 2024 Library Discourse bingo card. And I instantly recognized so many of the things that you were including in this. And I know that you and that particular post found a very receptive audience. It was very popular. All 25 of these topics will resonate to a certain degree with librarians, regardless of the age group we support, regardless of our geography, or for that matter, regardless of the age that we happen to be, or the number of years we've been in the profession. It's just some of these are very universal themes in our profession. I would love to give some context, however. Is the bingo discourse card something that you've done in the past? Is this something that you sort of accumulated over the year, had a running list, or was that just sort of something in your head you knew was going to come out one day?
I think I did the first one last year, and I don't know why I did. I don't know where it came from in my head, but any librarians that tend to be in the social media spheres, in the library spaces online, will notice, if you've been in it for more than a year, you'll notice there are sort of cycles of discourse that happen, where it's almost like clockwork. Every couple months, this conversation sparks up, and every couple months, this one does. And everybody talks about it for like 3 days solid, and then it filters away and the next conversation happens. But usually lots of drama ensues with people having varying opinions. Or my favorite one is when library Twitter has an opinion, and they decide to basically shove that opinion onto people outside of library Twitter, to their genuine shock and amazement to realize that we're here and we're going to talk about this now because you've tweeted something ridiculous. So those are my favorite ones, because that's not librarians fighting with each other. That's us going after somebody who said something ridiculous. So that's fun for me. And I don't know. I just was like, oh, it's like we could play bingo with this. And then I just decided to go into Canva, because, that's our best friend, canva.com, and threw a bunch of them in there. And it was really popular last year. So then this year, bunch of conversation was happening in December, and I was like, okay, I guess it's time to update the bingo card for 2024. So yeah, it's just a bunch of silliness. I spend my evening working on one day this month.
Well, and I'll be honest, I truly appreciate your humor. And it reminded me a great deal of airing our library-related grievances, like celebrating Festivus on an episode of Seinfeld. And I date myself, but I mean, it's just this whole, like, you just have to release all of this out at once and sort of put it out there. I'm going to be honest, so much that happens on social media, and some of these fall into that category. You don't even have to chime in, because you can already anticipate how some of this conversation is going to play out. And I saw, you see these relatively new people post on social media, and I sort of step back and go, oh, you sweet soul, just wait until you see what you have coming to you. When you say it just honestly, it's hard, because on the one hand, I love social media. On the other hand, it's sort of like a digital crucifixion of people's, when you put something out there, you allow people the opportunity to respond. And I think on some level, I'm just going to say it right now, sometimes I just keep my ideas to myself. Part of that is because I'm sensitive. I'm tuned into the fact that library Twitter gets infiltrated by a lot of people who are not librarians. And sometimes it can be rather perilous. Friends, the bingo card is outstanding. And I'm so grateful that Kelsey is here today because it is an opportunity for her to, rant on some of the hills she'll die on. And I realize that, the theme of today's episode is hills I'll die on. But I think in this context, we're talking about opinions for which you have some fairly strong thoughts on these particular topics, so much so that you would articulate them. And I love going through all of these because, friends, I think each and every one of us could create our own library discourse bingo card. Someday, we might all have to do something like that. We can all have a Zoom call. It reminds me of those games you used to play during the pandemic. Kelsey, let me ask you, is there something you'd like to start with? Which of these myriad of topics that are all library related, would you like to kick this off?
I think my favorite one, the one I'm most aggressively passionate about, and I will say that some of the ones on here I'm not aggressively passionate about. They're just ones that that people fight about on Twitter that I pull up the popcorn and enjoy watching, And some of them are ones I'm not sure how I feel about it yet, but some of them are ones I feel strongly about yet. And I will preface this by saying, because yes, as you're right, Amy, now when you put yourself out there, you get people's responses. So let me please preface this by saying I'm pretty open to new information changing my opinions on things. So if I say something today and I feel strongly about it now, that does not in fact mean that opinion cannot change in the future, and it may. So I am not married. I am not agreeing to say I'm married to these opinions for the rest of my life.
There is room for nuance. Yeah. Yes, there's room for nuance. All right.
But my favorite one is I think it might be kind of controversial to some people. I do not believe that there is such thing as good books and bad books. And I don't believe that literary quality is a thing that is real. And so one of the boxes on here is book elitism. And so for me, that's the big one. This whole idea that a book could be fundamentally better than or worse than another book is, to me, absurd. And it opens the door to a lot of judgment and ridiculous made-up rules that deter people from reading. So for me, book elitism is the big hill I'll die on. And I get into little engagements with my students about this too, because they'll slander books to each other, or scoff at their guilty pleasure or whatever. Oh, I know it's terrible, but I love Twilight or whatever. And I'm like, hey, there's no such thing as good and bad books. There's just stories you enjoy and stories you don't enjoy, So I think it's funny when students do it, but when we as professionals do it, whether it's format based because we're going after graphic novels again for the 700th time this year, or if it's audiobooks because for the 800th time this year somebody doesn't think listening to an audiobook counts as reading, which is ridiculous, especially for a species that is basically based on oral storytelling. So this kind of elitism from professionals really makes me so mad, because it really isn't a true thing. We just decided certain kinds of books were literary and certain weren't, and what does that even mean? It doesn't matter.
I completely agree with you. Literacy shaming is something that we've talked a lot about on this show. And for me, it's oftentimes the issue that we have is not with our students being elitist. It's with the teachers who have definitely formed strong opinions about which books are better than others for our students to read. And so, no, I absolutely can identify with that. I am guilty of calling some books fun books. And I read a really important essay that was talking about graphic novels being called dessert books. And friends, I'll include that link in the show notes. But I remember when teachers were like, oh, you need to get a book for our for our reading in our class. And then I'd say, oh, well, then you guys can also get another fun book. And that message, calling one book that you're doing for your teacher and then the other book that you pick for yourself, is sometimes people call it a free choice, but I remember slipping in and calling it the fun choice because you got to pick what you wanted as opposed to what your teacher wanted you to read. And it was like, oh, that's terrible.
Isn't it fun when we start to like investigate our own word choices and you realize like the connotations we're accidentally building, pick a quick read or an easy read. It's like, well, is it necessarily easy or quick? Not really. Is it necessary? If we say this book's fun, does that mean the ones for class are necessarily definitely not ever going to be fun, right? Like it's interesting when you start to analyze your own word choices. Yeah.
Well, and as long as we're on the topic of word choices, a lot of us have, I know when I taught elementary, we had an everybody fiction, an E for everybody. But that E used to be for easy. Who are we kidding? It said E because F was for fiction and then E was for easy. And then somebody said, oh, nope, you're all of a sudden, a lot of people are going to take offense that you are calling like half your library easy, as in the people who read them, the students who read them, aren't capable of reading the hard books.
Right. And also, what if those books are hard for them? Then you're just shaming them, right? Because now you're like, well, this is supposed to be easy. Why isn't it easy for you? Like, oh, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I remember E for everybody. And I was like, oh, I always heard it was easy, but okay, whatever. But you understand why, because words matter, friends. Words matter. All right, Kelsey, pick another one of your library discourse bingos that you want to share with the group.
Should we? This is an easy one because I think most of us kind of are on the same page on this one. I think. Well, that's probably not true. That's my own little filter bubble, I think. Graphic novels do not need vacations. Graphic novels do not need to be put on vacation. And in fact, doing cutesy things like putting certain types of book on vacation is not cute. It's actually just restriction of access.
I've seen this mostly on Facebook. I have seen these conversations on Facebook.
Yes.
And I'm going to say, as somebody who's taught elementary for a long time, it was 14 years, I remember teachers coming to me and saying quietly, we need to not check out so many Diary of a Wimpy Kid books, or we need to not, I don't want my kids checking out, Captain Underpants. And if those books were checked out, that's one thing. But I mean, asking me to like physically move the books out of the collection when the class comes just felt so abhorrent. But it came from the teachers who were like, look, the parents are telling me they don't want any more Diary of a Wimpy Kid books coming home. And it was really like, really?
Right. Well, then the parents need to speak with their kids and, then that's between the kids and the parents, right? That's not, no. I don't, see, I had this too when I was at the elementary level because it comes from the teachers usually. And I kind of understand where they're coming from because they're like trying to accomplish certain units and certain like standards or whatever. And the library is supporting that. But the library also is its own course. Like the library class is its own thing and we have our own standards and purposes that we're meeting too. So you can't really do that. You can't really restrict access to books. And this is probably kind of controversial too for some librarians, but I don't think that we should ever deter checking out of a book, even if it is literally the 100th time that person is reading Diary of a Wimpy Kid. I just don't think that's our business, Now, maybe this is for me personal because I was a kid in school who did only exclusively read fantasy for a while, and then eventually romance and only romance, and that was it, and it was always going to be romance. And so what? I was reading, like, what? You know what I mean? Like, who cares? It didn't hurt me in life, I didn't. So what does it matter? Is it better to have them read Diary of a Wimpy Kid for the 100th time or not read? Because that's what's happening. They're not going to just read something else because you took away the one they wanted. They're simply not going to read, right? Like, because reading is self-driven. So we know that if you just let them have at it for long enough, they'll eventually probably have other interests and they'll eventually seek out other information. But that's not going to happen if you take away the thing they're interested in, I don't think. I'm a firm believer in that just not being a strategy that works or is worth doing. And it doesn't really matter if they're reading it for the 100th time. Who cares?
Well, and I do think that it does introduce the opportunity to expand your collection and do other read-alikes, so other types of books that are similar in format. And, that's a sort of, hey, if you like, Diary of a Wimpy Kid, you might like these other illustrated novels.
Yeah, and I think that gives us the chance to really do what we're supposed to do, which is to brush up our book talking skills and our promotion skills and our display skills and marketing skills. Like, that's where it comes in. Like, you can't force somebody to take something else, but you can try to entice them, by making maybe another area in the library look super, super cool, add some lights or some music or some stuffed animals or, you know what I mean? Like, or do book talks, do author studies. Like, that stuff is really where the power of exposure comes to, right? But you can't take away the thing they like and then think, okay, well, now go find something else instead, right? Because that's not, here's a little secret. That's not actually choice, then, is it? Right? If we're saying we're all about choice, taking away the thing they want and still patting yourself on the back for letting them choose anything else, that's not choice. So that doesn't count.
Kelsey, tell me, what is something else on this bingo card that absolutely just keeps you up at night?
We could talk about the weeding conversation. I love weeding is like my favorite thing to do and talk about. I just love it. It's like spring cleaning with someone else's junk. I love it.
Why does it deserve a space on your bingo card?
Okay, so I think it's kind of twofold. Like, firstly, this is one of those ones I like on Twitter because it's usually librarians we'll say informing non-librarians about what's up. And that's usually because a community member sees a dumpster full of books, takes a picture of the dumpster full of books, and then posts that picture, usually Facebook or somewhere, with scandalized over the fact that librarians hate books and are throwing perfectly good books away. And there are children in XYZ place that would love to have these books. So that's one of my favorite Twitter discourses and library discourses, is because it's like a mob mentality of people that just are like, put their gloves on and have been like waiting all year for this dumpster picture to show up so we could inform people about weeding. And I just kind of love it.
No, and again, we've all had to come up with solutions that work for us. And some of us are dictated, some of what we can and can't do are dictated by board policies. And, ultimately, we have an obligation to our students and our school community, and having outdated, biased, stereotypical, I want to insert all those words, these books it's irresponsible to have them on the shelves. And I remember when I had one of my fifth grade teachers years ago did a passport around the world sort of activity, and the kids each did a country study. And I was reading our country books that were from the 90s. And friends, this was only like 10 years ago. And I got to tell you, so I went to the teacher and I said, hey, listen, I'm going to get some new country books. Tell me which ones are really popular with the kids, and I'll make sure to get those first, because I obviously can't buy a lot right now. I can buy some. She goes, well, make sure you give me your old ones. I was like, why? And she's like, oh, because I'm going to put them in my class library. And okay, friends, I did a really terrible thing when I was in her room and she wasn't. I took a picture of this bookcase that she had pulled out for all her students to use for their country study. And as a social studies teacher, I just about died, because I was like, wait, she has been taking the discards from this library for years. And I was like, wait, that means her students for how many years have been reading the discarded books from my library, from my predecessors, who are like, oh, sure, here, you can have this 1978 book on Poland, because, nothing's changed, I'm sure. It was just like, no, including a set of encyclopedias from 1982. I was like, oh my goodness. And friends, again, this teacher retired shortly thereafter, and I was very grateful because the nightmare could end. But truly, what are we doing when that's, if we let these books go into the teacher's hands, it is irresponsible because it is antiquated information. It's outdated. It's like we owe it to our students to make sure that when we decide books no longer have relevance and they're inaccurate and they reinforce negative stereotypes, that we get them out, and not that we take them and donate them to some village in some third world country, because that is also not a solution. They have to go. And that means being recycled. That means being tossed. And yes, that is something that you quietly have to find a solution, but you absolutely cannot let that outdated information. Now, could you make art with it? Sure. You ever seen those fun upcycle things that people do with books? Like they make a turkey out of their book, or they do they use a book and they make it into a handbag, or they make it into something where they can, craft it into like a secret box. I've seen them take Dremel tools and carve out the center, and all of a sudden you have a secret hidey hole for things that you keep, and you upcycle your books into art. That's fine. No damage has actually happened. The kids haven't tried to write about it in their report. So
yeah, sometimes we have to save our communities from themselves and their tendency to want to save all the books, because it's really important to remember that books are not sacred objects. They're just a vehicle for information. That's it. That's all they are. This is not romantic. It's a book. This is not a 400-year-old book. This is a mass-produced modern day book. It has no sacred value. There are too many of them. There are too many. Listen, my friends, there are more books than people who want books. You know what I mean? There are too many. Million published every year, whatever. So you have to save your community from itself and dispose of in whatever way your community and municipality has available to you, and in the best way possible. Sometimes they do actually have to be disposed. I can't even tell you how many books I had to get rid of that were titled Soviet Today, Soviet of Today, the Soviet Union, there's so many. I started in 2016. There were so many books about the modern day Soviet Union still in the library. So you can imagine how old the nonfiction collection was. So yeah, dumpster full of books, one of my favorites, and I think it gets a lot of good discourse going, but it also is quite a pile on, so it's always also a little bit much too, but I still love it.
Yeah, what is something else on this list that you are just nope, it absolutely just drives you up a wall?
Okay, well, this one isn't even one I really have a strong opinion on, but it was a wild ride a couple weeks ago. The library should have playgrounds. Did you experience that discourse? Oh my God, what a ride! That was fascinating.
No,
did you miss it?
Wait, I didn't see that.
Oh my God!
So wait, yeah, where was that, on Facebook or is it
Twitter? So
wait, I do. I caught the tail end. Of it. Was this the one where the families wanted to just drop their kids off at the library like a daycare center?
Yeah, it's so some woman who's I don't know, I guess she's a mom. She tweeted something pretty innocuous. I think it got totally sparked a wild conversation. But she was just griping about how there's nowhere indoors that she can take her kids to get their energy out at night. And she mentioned I am once again begging to cities to put playgrounds in libraries so my kid can be indoors and get off. And oh my gosh, the conversation, 4 solid days of nonstop raging from library Twitter. Oh my gosh, it was wild. I didn't even have time to really have a strong opinion on it because the discourse went so intense so quickly. I was just whoa, But Anyway, the short sort of summary of that is that many librarians do not think there should be playgrounds in libraries, primarily because libraries are not playgrounds.
I looked at that.
They're two very valuable but different services.
And but it was definitely a public librarian, issue, because I think that I've not heard, I think it because people see that as a destination for like the weekends or after school. I don't see them making the same critique of their school libraries. Although I do think it is interesting because when you go through the library furniture catalogs, invariably you find library furniture that is oftentimes utilized more for the public sector. And it was wild. There was this, it was like a carrel, it looked like a study carrel, but it had like a little side car for your toddler, and it was padded. And so you had a little work carrel, and next to it was this little like playpen that was adjacent for the working parent. And it was like, okay, on the one hand, I was like, oh, where was that when I had little kids? And I was like, actually, I can't get any work done if my kid's with me. And that's like, I understand that, but I push back against that in terms of being a solution. And I, obviously, again, this is more of a public sector thing where they have these little, it's not even a bassinet. It was like a little play space for a child, and you could throw some toys in there, and you get this little kid, and it's got, it would work for a very certain population of families. And I don't know. I'm just feeling very, very old fashioned.
Yeah, so I kind of laugh about this discourse, but to be honest, it started a discussion that was sort of about how libraries have had to serve all these roles were never really intended or prepared to serve. And so that was kind of like the funny conversation was the playground, like monkey bars in library. Like, that's funny. We could all laugh about that. But the conversation it led to was more interesting because it was really investigating like, well, when and how did libraries become expected to serve every possible public need that exists? And that is a problem in library world, like that we are continually given more hats and continually serving more public needs. And like, yep, you know what? Families do need a place where they can work with their toddler next to them. Families do need a place to bring their kids when it's cold outside. But why is that place the library? Why are there not other public services, right? That's the real issue.
But I think I know where that came from, though. I think that especially the public sector, especially when, and I'm going to go way back to when Google became a thing. And when Google became a thing, and all of a sudden, the conversation then was, why do we need librarians? We've got Google. And all of a sudden, public librarians especially had to have a real coming to Jesus moment and say, we have to create some relevance here, because if we aren't relevant, our tax support is going to dissipate. And so all of a sudden, we have to be that community, that center for community happenings. And it's where you pick up your tax forms, and it's where you can get computer skills, and it's where you can learn how to speak English. And all of a sudden, it's going to be the new community center, because if that idea that if Google can fix everything, I think the public librarians had to rebrand in a way that addressed the larger community needs. And I think that's where it came from.
Yeah, and I think that they did, and we did, and even the school libraries, we've seen the same thing with like school libraries sort of rebranding in a way, kind of what they provide. But it's interesting to me that we have all done that, and I don't even disagree with it. Like, I actually like the school library being more of a hub in general than I do like it being only for specifically going for reference books or whatever. But I don't mind that. In schools, I think it's pretty cool because the kids really do need kind of a community space of some sort, besides the cafeteria, which is more like a war zone, you know? Yeah, but it's interesting that even though we've taken on all these hats and we actually do provide all these services, that it's still the public still resist changing their image of the library, and they really do still think it's a place where a couple of old ladies check out a book or two occasionally to a person, right? Like, it's so interesting. We've done all these things and changed all these things and offer all these services.
Pick another one. What's another hill that you've decided? We've seen a great deal on social media, and it was on your bingo card this year.
How about the age appropriate? We talk about the concept of being age appropriate. That's one of my favorite ones too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's it gets people into a lot of pickles because there is wide disagreement as to what constitutes as appropriate for whom and when and where. So I really like that recently, in recent years, librarians and educators have been sort of seeking to find other terms to use when discussing, books and resources. And I know some of us have different ones we like. I like the term age relevant. I know some people like other things, but it has helped. It has helped questioning this concept of appropriate has helped me to do better at collection development, I think, because instead of trying to wrap my head around the subjective term of appropriate, I'm rethinking what does that mean and to who. So that's one that I kind of like, that it's controversial and people argue over it, but I kind of like that it's caused us to look for maybe new words, to help with this kind of aspect of the job.
Well, and again, there's so much judgment when you use the word. I need to find, and I've seen this and again, I oftentimes I am not going to engage with these things when I see them on social media because I already know how it's going to play out. And unless I can attach a relevant episode that we've recorded, I don't see my 2 cents being worth anything. But when people use a word like appropriate, it is laced with judgment. It is absolutely you can't escape from this idea. You are instilling in this word what you feel is appropriate, having no idea what other people might think.
We really have different cultural and local concepts of what is appropriate for who and when. It varies much more widely than we think because we have our own echo chamber about it. And so you can't really know even what other people would and want to consider appropriate. Sometimes you see the differences, but sometimes you can't be capable of being aware of how different people could be defining that term.
Well, and when you've got high school, I know this comes up a great deal with Colleen Hoover books. And everybody's like, whoa, Colleen Hoover, who's got them in their library? And you're like, oh, this is I see where this is going.
It is fascinating to me because...
And then they pull up the infographic about which books, are appropriate.
It is fascinating to me because I don't know if you've noticed, but that is a common thing. People asking about Colleen Hoover books. And then I don't know if you've noticed, but I read the comments. I don't usually comment myself, but I've noticed that most of the comments are from people that are saying, absolutely not, no, no, no. And there's very few ever ones from people that say yes. Although I know people do have her books in their library. And so I suspect that people are because it's not anonymous, people that do have them just don't want to call attention to it by posting about it in Facebook. That's my little conspiracy theory suspicion that I have, is that there's a lot more people that have them than you would guess from some of those threads, because they're just well, I don't want anybody judging me about this. I'm going to move on with my day,
Well, and I will say, because I know there are some librarians who absolutely buy for their teachers, and their collection supports their teachers as much as it supports their students. And I've talked to librarians who have a very significant budget for their print collection, and they've been able to create collections of books that in the high school are integrated with the rest of their collection. And it is with the purpose of supporting their staff. And their staff comes down regularly to do their book club picks. And these are young adults, and these are our adult books. And, I've heard a very convincing argument from people who can afford to be able to support the purchases that they know their staff are going to enjoy. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah, because the school library really is intended to serve the school community, and our teachers are part of that community. So if you have the budget for it, many librarians do develop collections that are intended to serve the many different audiences of the school. So that is true, and that is another reason we can't throw the term appropriate around that much, because it's like, well, for who and for why and for how, it gets a little bit more muddy. Then it's not really a useful term, you know?
No, muddy. That's excellent. Pick another one. Let's I'm having fun.
See what else we have. Oh, this one does make me mad. Okay. You've seen people talk about I wonder how you feel about this. Working off your fines to teach responsibility.
Oh, I've seen that. And you know what? I have heard, and it's interesting because this whole idea of fines is already like you're treading in very like you gotta be real careful when it comes to fines. And I think that there are many people who said I'm fine free. We don't have any fines. I've heard of people saying, oh, you know what? We don't have any fines, but if the kids want to bring in some cans, we do a canned food drive for a local, and we collect cans instead of fines. And I've heard of that. I've heard of kids reading off their book fines, and that's curious. I don't know. I mean, I think, I'll be honest, I came from an experience myself where, if you ruined or lost a book, you paid for it. And I've also grown to see how flawed that approach was. And yet I wasn't instituting anything new. I continued something that was there when I got there. My predecessor became the high school librarian, so I was continuing something that had been in place for a long time, and I know that's no excuse, but it didn't give me any reason to question that practice of charging people for books that were ruined, that were destroyed, that were lost. So I don't know, but what do you think?
Yeah, so I think the issue of whether to have fines or not is that's a whole conversation too. But for me, this one is the concept of working off or reading off your fine. I don't like that. And I didn't used to have an opinion on it until I learned more from people about the equity aspect of it. And then when I started to think about it, I really did start to get sort of angry about it, because these are children, right? In our school library, they're children. They're kids, and having them work off a fine is so inequitable, because basically you're collecting labor from only people who come from families who cannot afford to pay the fine, right? So this is just fundamentally inequitable. The kids have no control at all over whether their family can or will pay that fine. They have zero control over that. They're children. They don't work. And so to have fines to begin with is kind of an issue, because the kid is already being sort of punished for something they're not financially capable of even helping with, but more importantly, the working off and reading off is first of all, reading off the fines, you are using reading as a punishment. There's a lot of layers to this that you may not have thought of yet, right? Do we want to ever use reading in books as a punishment? What do you think that's doing to our goal of fostering a love of literacy? That's not good. Those connotations will sink into their brains for the rest of their lives. And it doesn't even matter if the kid likes reading. But then if they like reading, it's not a punishment anyway. So what are you doing here? What is happening right now, right? If they don't like reading, then it is a punishment. And that means you're making reading a punishment. Oh, not good. And the working off fines one isn't great either, because it's the same thing. You're forcing labor on people that come from one financial situation, and it's labor that is not required from kids that come from a different financial situation. So that is just fundamentally icky. The more you think about it, the more icky I think it gets. So that's something I had not ever thought of until it was brought to my attention, and then I started to dwell on it. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And like, cause I had done it, my first year, like I had, this cute idea, work off your fines. And now I have like these traumatic, like imaginings of it. Like, oh my God, Kelsey, what were you doing,
I definitely want to bring up this next one because I have some strong feelings. Dr. Seuss. Because Read Across America is coming up.
Oh, you're right.
And
it is coming up.
Read Across America, for the longest time, was a Dr. Seuss. Really, just those were the images. I mean, those were all of the images for Read Across America were all Dr. Seuss. And taking a look at the, quote unquote classics through contemporary eyes.
Yeah, I feel the same way about the Dr. Seuss discourse as I do about the Harry Potter discourse and the classics discourse in general. And that is that we are not book museums. That's not our purpose. I'm not even a literature teacher. I don't teach literature. I don't teach reading. And I do not teach how to protect books forever and preserve them forever and ever and ever, right? That's not the purpose of the library. Purpose of the library is to foster the current and emerging reading needs of our students. And so what I would say to people that are so attached to their nostalgia for these books is, what does that have to do with your job? You can be nostalgic for these books. You can have shelves of Dr. Seuss books in your house and read them at night to yourself all the time. Like, that's great. That's fine. Whatever, man. Deck your house out in Harry Potter if you want. Who cares? That's your life. That's your personal stuff. But this is a public space, and these students are modern-day students with modern needs. So is your nostalgia serving the needs of the students, or are you just being kind of stubborn about your personal nostalgia? And, like, the books are old. What? Do you know how many books are published every year? It's like 1 million or something. It's like a lot. And so what? Like, do you think that maybe there are other rhyming books that could use, like, their time in the spotlight, perhaps, Like, it doesn't even mean that the Dr. Seuss books are, like, all garbage and should all be thrown away. Like, nobody's saying that. But we are saying, like, that there are other books you could highlight, like ones that were written during your student's lifetime and that show people and images and perspectives and situations that are relevant to current day students that they will relate to. Like that, like we don't have to keep reading the same stories forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. It's so weird to me how, like, aggressively holding on to a very tiny, small amount of super old stories a lot of us are, like there's so many more stories out there, man, Well,
and I'm going to say, as somebody who worked in an elementary library for 14 years, the conversation was always about Boxcar Children, Nancy Drew, Hardy Boys, the Arthur books, the Babar books. I got to tell you, there is so much, and I did an episode on this, and we talked about extreme reading when you get rid of the classics, because you're not supporting your contemporary readers. You are feeding this nostalgia, and it's hard because librarian nostalgia is really an impediment, and it's one of the reasons why it is so much fun to go into somebody else's collection and help them weed. And there was one of the highlights of 2020 for me, because I moved into 2 libraries that had been sort of overseen by one person for the past 15 years. And we didn't have any students in the building, and I was brutal, absolutely brutal, because this was another librarian's collection. I had zero attachment to anything, didn't buy anything in that collection. I didn't support that collection. I was coming in there to do a job, and that was to clean out. The nostalgia really means that there's a lot on your shelves that you're like, you just can't part with.
It's so hard, but it's so important to separate our personal love for literature and for books and for types of books from our job. Like, it is totally fine for you to like any books you want personally, as librarians, whoever, anybody. What happens between you and a book in your home is between you, and that's all that matters. And your love is fine. because it's not hurting anybody if it's just between you and the book, right? However, in the library, a public space, things can be hurting people in many different ways. And can I just, before I get the emails from people about this, can I just say that when I say move on from this like obsession with old books, of like rushing to protect these old books and defend them, that is not the same thing as me saying weed them all, throw them all away, light them on fire. Okay, I'm not saying that. And some of them still probably should be on the shelves because circulation and demand matters. But some of them you are holding on to because you like them and not because they're serving a current need, and you know it. You know, we all do it and we all know it. I had my heart broken this year because I finally had to read this series in fantasy that I bought and I personally very much liked. It was Grave Mercy by Robin Lefebvre's. And I tried everything. I promoted it. I book talked it. I had book talk cards on it, every front faced, everything for like 2 years, and it won't go out. So I finally redid it. So I was heartbroken, and so I get it. But that's our personal opinions. And the library has such limited shelf space. You know, we just have to prioritize using it for modern needs and for reflecting modern audiences and their lived experiences and what their demographic looks like and what their world looks like. So if something is taking up room and is known to be harmful, to have harmful representation in it, as some of these books are unequivocally, is that shelf space being used as wisely as it could be? You know, that's what I would say.
Well, and I will say, as somebody who has been very fortunate to have libraries which had to be boxed up at one point or another, and this is where life sometimes dictates and makes decisions for us that we wouldn't have necessarily felt the urgency to do. But when the boxing, your entire collection is going to be boxed up because they're doing an asbestos abatement or you're getting new carpeting, we had to do a very brutally unforgiving weed because the collection was getting boxed up. And so we did a non-circulation report for 8 years. If it hadn't circulated in 8 years, it was gone. Like, no questions asked. It was gone. And we still had a considerable collection when, everything was done and we're putting everything back on the shelves. And I'll tell you what, it was an absolute blessing because what the staff could not have appreciated was what didn't go back on the shelves. We were absolved of that guilt. And so, friends, if anybody ever says, hey, we're boxing up this collection because of X or Y or Z, you say, you know what? It's a good thing to do because it forces our hand to really just let data decide what's going to be on our shelves. And oh, by the way, when those books get put back on the shelf, it's not like any staff member can come after you and say, hey, you took those books off the shelf. You're like, you know what? We had to box up our collection and we ran reports and those books hadn't seen the light of day in 20 years. And it's like, we have to see the upside of this.
Yeah, and that's why, having weeding policies and practices and is so helpful because you can rely on them to let you put your emotion aside. So like I'm an aggressive weeder. I have pretty strict weeding criteria, but I do allow myself 2 saves a year, but I'm not allowed to save the same book 2 years in a row. So I have this little kindness loophole in my weeding policies to keep so that I can save 2 that I absolutely do not want to get rid of, but not 2 years in a row. So that gives them one more chance, but those policies can help us to overcome our nostalgia. And, just remember that the library isn't your personal bookshelf. So they're 2 different things. And so what happens in your personal bookshelf is just different than what's happening in your library. And that's as it should be,
Before I let you go, I need you to tackle this one last one. It comes up quite often, and that is decorating our libraries for the holidays.
Oh, man, this one is... People get very upset about this one, and I kind of understand a little bit, but I also don't because, again, this is a public space. It's not our living room. Nobody is saying that you shouldn't decorate your personal living room however you want to. Have it as Halloween 24/7 all year round if you want. Who cares? But the library is just not a personal space. It is a public, secular space. And so I do have to admit, my thinking on this changed too. So I really do. My opinions on things changes. When I started, I decorated the library with Christmas stuff, and I was so proud of myself because I really thought, patting myself on the back and thinking that, having a menorah up too counted as me being diverse and representative, right? Like, okay, it's all Christmas and then there's one little menorah over there too. So, hey, I was being fair, right? And so I get it. Like, I get it. Like, I'm not better than anybody who's doing these things. I've done it. A lot of us have done it. But then I started to learn more from people that had other experiences and perspectives about questioning that practice. And it started to, again, see how, like, that wasn't being fair because I wasn't decorating for Diwali, and I wasn't decorating for Eid, and I wasn't acknowledging the fact that some people's religions prevent them from engaging in decorations and celebrations. And I wasn't acknowledging that some people are purely secular and are not comfortable in decorated spaces. So, like, you don't see it sometimes until it's pointed out to you, and then you start to see it and think about it. So, yeah, if you haven't thought about this yet and you're still happily decorating, I would just encourage people to really be honest, like honest self-reflection with yourself as to whether you truly are equally celebrating everyone, or are you celebrating yours mostly and then doing a couple little ones to make it seem like it's balanced? And even if you are truly being equal, which I don't know is possible, even if you are you? Because there are people who don't celebrate anything, and so what about them? And there are people that's religions prevent them from engaging in celebrations of any kind. So is your space then available for those people? Is it available to serve its purpose, which is to serve the information needs of the current users of the space? So I kind of am compassionate on this one, to be honest, because I think we all bring our own biases to this job and our own experiences, and sometimes you just don't see it until it's pointed out to you. But I think a lot of people need to have that coming to moment that I had, where you have to sort of be honest with yourself about whether you're being as equal as you think you are about decorating your library for holidays.
It's just so much food for thought, because it's something that we absolutely do not have in our spaces, is this sounding board of somebody else who teaches in an equivalent space, a space that's something that we all have in common. You and I, we just spent all day at work, and the fact is, I've never been in your space and you've never been in mine, but I have a very good idea of how you spent your day. And likewise, because as librarians, we have a certain shared understanding of what it's like to work in a school library. And yet there's nobody else I can talk to. Not in my district. There isn't. This is when I get to work through these ideas. And it helps tremendously to think back on our own practice if we hear how others have come to terms with how we regard our own practice. And so while I don't expect any of this conversation to change anybody's minds, what is more important is that we have an opportunity to see issues from a multitude of perspectives, and I think that that's something that this gives us. I think when people chime in on social media, I worry only because it's so easy to throw out these sort of quips, these sort of cuts, these, just a little barb, a little jab, a little something that's a little snark. And it's very indignant and self-righteous, and it oftentimes puts our own practice on a pedestal. And I question, I as somebody who is a lifelong learner, I am embarrassed to admit to quite a few things that I did when I was starting off, and I'm continuing to do better. But let me ask you, Kelsey Bogan, you are a librarian's librarian. You are one of these people I have come to regard as a truly valuable resource to our profession. And I before I let you go, your blog, Don't You Shush Me, and links in the show notes, you have made it, you're very intentional in all that you share. And so I'm hoping before we let you go, would you give listeners an idea of some of the things that you're so excited about? It's clearly a passion project, which for you means giving away everything you do. It's one of the reasons why I want to make sure we talk at least once a year. But, Kelsey, give us an idea. Why should listeners be bookmarking your blog? Because it really has been important for me when I need to learn. And I know others will feel the same way.
I think my blog does pretty well, like not to toot my own horn, but it gets pretty good views. And it's fascinating to me because I didn't write it ever thinking anyone would read it. It was a reflective practice for me. That was the reason I started it. It was just because, high school librarianship in particular is very isolating, right? We are the only people in our whole building, sometimes whole district, that actually does our job. Elementary librarians often will at least have some other elementary librarians in the district, not always. But high school librarian, it's very isolating, extremely isolating, very few sounding boards. And so I started blogging about what I was trying and why and how it was working because I just wanted the reflective practice to be able to work through my thought processes and why I was doing what I was doing and explore what I was learning along the way. And I think that's why people like it, is because it's kind of like being inside my head while I'm learning things. Like, I don't know that it's like me. It's not really always like me teaching people how to do things. It's more like, oh, this is what was in her head when she was in fact learning how to genreify, so I think maybe that's what people get out of it. And I think that's super cool because how often do we get the chance to like see people's reasoning and rationale and thinking and process and mistakes and without having to do it ourselves, right? So I think that's why people like it. Also, the freebies I think are, helpful. We have very busy jobs. We are very under-resourced usually, and not reinventing the wheel is great. So like anytime I make something for school, I just put it on the blog for free because it's already made. Like, why wouldn't I? I feel super privileged that I often have the chance to be hired as keynote speaker and presenter and do webinars. And I love doing that. So if you guys are looking for somebody, I'm here. But I feel super privileged to have those opportunities. And I like that the blog is able to give basically the same information away for free in written form so that it's equitably available to librarians who don't have the chance to hire professional development, right? Which many of us don't, or have the chance to have great professional development hired for us, which many of us don't. So I really like that the blog gives me the chance to express my thoughts, get my name out there for people that are looking to hire keynote speakers or presenters, but also it just gives people a chance to get some PD without having to pay for it. So that's what I like about it. So don'tyoushishme.com, that's where I'm at.
So, Kelsey, I'm so grateful. And I know that you are starting your San Jose class, which means I'm grateful to have some time with you because you are very quickly going to take on all those grading responsibilities and you're going to go be an instructor. Would you please let listeners know where we can follow you on social media? Because I love all the content that you put out. And I just give us an idea of where you post regularly.
Sure. So I'm on TikTok in 2 spaces. I go through waves of very active and not very active on there, but at GVHS Library, that's my school TikTok. My personal TikTok is at Don't You Shush Me. So the same as my blog. And then Twitter is where I'm most at. I'm calling it Twitter. I'm not doing that other thing. I'm not calling it that.
That's okay.
It's Twitter. And it's just my name at Kelsey Bogan. And I do have the Blue Sky at the same name. And someday I may remember to go there and post things. And I think that they will come, but it's not, I still tend to automatically go to Twitter. So we'll see when that will change, but that's where I'm at.
Wonderful. Listen, I hope you have a fantastic rest of the winter coming into spring. And thank you so much. Let's connect next year in 2025.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Kelsey. A very special thank you to the wonderful listeners who shared their hills with us today. Amanda Hunt, Arika Dickens, Robin Thompson, Melissa Shenk, Sara Smith, Melanie Le Jeune, and Steve Tatro. and to Kelsey Bogan, whose bingo card of Library Discourse has given us all something to rage about. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. Be sure to follow on your favorite podcatcher so you'll never miss an episode. And if you really like listening today, consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Reviews help others find us. One last friendly reminder, friends, use the code UNITED to take advantage of Capstone's generous $20 discount off an order of $100 or more, and librarians who book their very first Literati Book Fair and mention the code UNITED when booking may qualify to receive a $500 gift card to Titlewave. Visit the link in today's show notes and call the Literati team to see if you qualify. I hope you will consider sending in your voice message with a purchase you regret for our next call-in episode. Visit the link in today's show notes for details. The topic of our next episode will be Project Lit and my conversation with Kristen Sierra and Corinna Tarvin. I hope you will tune in.